Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. This is a third video in a series of lessons that I'm making solving January 2025 paper for Oxford AQA Psychology. This is PS01. I have already covered sections 1 and 2 for it. So social influence and memory is already done. You can watch those videos on my channel before this one. Uh, Today my intention is to cover psychopathology section C for PS01 so that next video onwards I can move towards PS02. In psychopathology, I will be covering complete answers. Like in the previous two videos, I was typing out some points for the answers. This time I've kept the model answers on the screen because I just intend to be quick about it. My focus is going to be on explaining to you how to answer the questions. If you want to see the complete answers, you can pause the video and read through the answers as well. I won't be reading out all the answers. I'll keep referring to them to illustrate what I'm explaining to you about how to answer the questions. Okay, I do take private tuition for psychology because I get asked a lot, so making it clear right now only. I do take private tuition and I can help you with any correspondence work also if you need me to correct your papers and give you feedback. For all of that, my contact number and email ID is available in the description box and pinned comment below. This lesson is meant for Oxford AQA students because it is from your past paper. But in case if you are a UK AQA student, then also this lesson is equally useful to you because even you have psychopathology in your syllabus as the fourth topic. So in answering paper 1, exactly these questions which have been asked can be asked on your paper also. So the topics are perfectly relevant to your syllabus. Okay, let's begin with the first question. The first question they've asked is deviation from ideal mental health is one definition of abnormality. Explain one limitation of deviation from ideal mental health as a definition of abnormality. And this is for 3 marks. What you have to do to score well is first name the limitation. You must have learned of at least 2 limitations per definition. I hope you're going about that way. Name it, then explain it. In the sense, either give an example to show how that limitation applies or just elaborate a little more on it. And then just give a conclusion. Link it to grave like generalizability, reliability, validity, or just explain a little more. There's nothing more to do for a 3 marks question. Most common mistake here is just to name the weakness and leave it at that, and then not to explain any further, not to give any example. That is where students lose marks. Another common mistake I've seen, which might not make you lose marks but which can make you waste time, is to write unnecessarily long points, like giving a point and a counterpoint, everything just for 3 marks, just as you would in a 20 marker essay, writing that way. That is not required. 3 marks, 3 straightforward points as I have written here. That's all. Okay, and I know this is a little far off mistake, but students do make it. Don't give limitations of any other definitions. There are 4 definitions. Students tend to confuse between the 4. So if you give a limitation, say, of deviation from social norms or deviation from statistical norms, of course, that will not be counted as correct. So for that, I can just tell you, read the question very carefully before answering so that you don't make those obvious type of mistakes. Okay, so as I've told you, I have named the weakness first, that this definition is unrealistic. Then I have given elaboration, why I'm saying it's unrealistic. Because Jahoda suggests that a person who is mentally fit should be having good self-esteem, coping with stress, and unless all of these criteria are met, the person falls into the abnormal category. But in reality, people will deviate from these standards at some point or the other. So I've given an example. Supposing someone fails in the exam, they are bound to be a little stressed, at least for some time. So that means a lot of people who are not actually abnormal can end up classified as abnormal just because the definition is very harsh or very unrealistic. So my point was it being unrealistic. Then you can see elaboration example is there next, and then a simple link pointing out what is the problem, that it can lead to unnecessary classification of abnormality. If I wanted to link it to grave, I could have just said this reduces the validity of the definition. Even that would be a good way of linking off. Okay, I want to remind you, anytime you can pause the video and read the complete answer if you need to. Let's come to the next question. Continuing with definitions of abnormality, they've asked us to identify and describe two other definitions. Now, I'm sure most of you have learned all the definitions well. The only thing becomes how to put it down in the paper, exactly how much to give, what not to give. Content is not difficult, presentation is difficult. So, the simplest thing is look at the marks allotted. 6 marks have been allotted, two definitions have been asked for. That means it is 3 marks per definition. Now, how to justify 3 marks for one definition? First, give the definition that itself is worth 1 mark. Then give some elaboration on the definition, again, some explaining of what it is or some example. And then one more elaboration or one more example of the definition. Do not give evaluation. Do not give strengths and weaknesses of the definition because it's identify and describe. The command term is not discuss. Both identify and describe are AO1 command terms, descriptive. They are not evaluative. So strengths, weaknesses are not going to count over here. So just for each definition, begin with the definition, whatever you have memorized, then give 2 points of elaboration or example or both. Just repeat this twice. So 3 marks and 3 marks. For example, I've taken one as deviation from social norms. Then I have defined what it is that a person is considered abnormal if they do not follow the rules of society and they do not meet the expectations that society has placed on them. And then I've given an example. Someone's talking loudly to themselves. Society does not expect this. So it will be classified as abnormal. In the same way, if someone is speaking to people whom no one else can see, or someone's hearing voices that no one else can hear, that will be classified as abnormal, because again, this is not what society expects normal people will do. So two examples I have given to further the definition. So how I will be given 3 marks here. First, for naming the correct definition and defining it correctly. Second, for one example, it counts like one elaboration. And third, for a third example, counts as another elaboration. Same thing you can see I've repeated for the next definition, failure to function adequately. So if you need to, you can pause the video and see the same structure has been followed there. Okay, these were simple AO1 questions. The next question they had asked was again a simple AO1 type. Name two characteristics of phobia. They have not specified here that they have to be emotional or cognitive or behavioral characteristics, means we are free to take any. Because the first question students ask me when we practice a question of this type, does it have to be emotional? Does it have to be behavioral? If they haven't specified any, you're free to take any. You can mix up two or you can take both from the same category. Again, as obvious as it might seem, this is a common mistake. Phobia is mentioned directly, but giving the characteristics of depression instead, or giving of OCD instead. Don't make those mistakes. Definitely give characteristics of only phobia. Here, it's difficult to make a mistake in writing. Mistake can be in preparation. So when you're preparing the content for this, make sure you're not confusing between phobia, depression, OCD, that you're keeping them separate when you're preparing. Then only you can score well on this answer. It is a name command term, AO1. It's up to you. You want to just strictly name the symptoms or you just want to give a brief definition of them. Even if you just name, like what I've underlined in this answer, if you just write that much, then also you'll get 1 mark. But I have a preference for just explaining a little, so I've included that. That's optional. What is optional, I'm putting in the brackets also. So for example, I've named that avoidance is one feature. As you know, it's a behavioral feature of phobia. Then I've just explained in a few words that it is avoiding the feared stimulus. Don't want to write this, you can skip this. So this is when the person chooses not to go near, not to confront the stimulus that they are afraid of. And the second one I've named is irrational fear. So I'll get a 2 mark there. And then I've just explained it in a few words. Fear that is much higher in proportion compared to the danger posed by the stimulus. Okay, so this was again a straightforward one. Next was outlining the role of operant conditioning in maintaining a phobia. I think the questions have been really easy, in my opinion, for January 25 paper for psychopathology because there's no essay also and mostly descriptive questions. There are a few AO3, AO2 here and there, but most are focusing on AO1. So this was one section to really score. Okay, now operant conditioning as such, we know only in the dual process theory of phobia, it serves to maintain phobia. It does not help in acquisition, that is classical conditioning. But still they have emphasized, they have been really helpful in the question, and they have mentioned maintaining a phobia. Despite this, there have been students who have given classical conditioning, how it helps in acquiring a phobia. So please don't make that mistake. Be very sure what you're writing about before writing. When it comes to operant conditioning, maintaining a phobia for 2 marks, you can just name the way in which it maintains a phobia. I always begin with naming or identification. Here, you know, negative reinforcement is how phobia gets maintained. So, first, you can just name that negative reinforcement is the mechanism. You get 1 mark for that. And then, of course, you have to explain it. After all, it's outline, means you have to say something more. Exactly how does negative reinforcement help to maintain the phobia? You need to elaborate on that. This is also completely AO1, so you don't need to give any sort of strength or weakness, and there's nothing to apply it to. There's no situation given. Whenever I say that you need to explain a point, many students will ask me, can we give an example to explain? Of course, that is always there. You can always give some example to explain, either maybe from a real study that you have learned about, say, the little Albert study, or you can also give a general example. Supposing someone has a phobia of snakes, and so they never go near wild areas. That is how they maintain the phobia, through negative reinforcement. Examples are perfectly fine. Just make sure through the example you explain. What some students do is they'll say, for example, avoiding snakes leads to negative reinforcement. This does not outline, this does not explain how avoiding snakes is serving as negative reinforcement. So then they say, I've written an example, but I didn't get marks because you've not written the example correctly. You can't just name the example and leave it to the examiner's interpretation to understand what you're trying to say. Give a complete example to get marks. Then definitely examples count as explanations. So first you can see in the answer I've just named negative reinforcement. And then I have not given a particular example as such, but in general I have explained that whenever an individual engages in avoidance, that serves as indirect reinforcement because they do not have to confront the phobic stimulus, and that gives them a sense of relief. So that is the key thing, explaining how negative reinforcement is taking place. Whether the example is there or it is not there, that is fine. Okay, then coming to, they continued with the phobia topic, and here comes the application question, AO2. So they've named the character Asher. Asher has phobia of horses. Explain how systematic desensitization can be used to treat Asher's phobia. I know I repeat this a lot across videos, but it is the key thing. Why students lose marks in such a simple answer is not making use of the information given in the question. Phobia of horses. So they'll just keep on explaining what is systematic desensitization, on which principle it works, how a hierarchy is made, but no mention of Asher, no relating what they are writing to horses. If they've given you some information about him being afraid of horses, of course they want you to use that information in your answer. So number one area for losing marks is not to relate it to Asher and the horses. If you do that, you can expect, I would say, at the most 1 mark. If the examiner is really generous, they might give you 2. But of course, most examiners follow the mark scheme, and that will permit only 1 mark. So don't risk your marks for such a simple answer. Make sure all the points that you're giving are about phobia of horses. You know, in systematic desensitization, a hierarchy has to be made. Why not illustrate how the hierarchy will be made by taking the horses example? You have to explain it, right? So explain it using a horses example. You know that relaxation has to be done in systematic desensitization. Why not explain how Asher would do the relaxation? So talk about relaxation, what you've learned in AO1. Just keep on quoting Asher and his situation when you're explaining. That's all. That's all the difference between AO1 and AO2. Make sure your answer is AO2 focused. Looking at the marks that it is 4 marks, make sure to give a total of 4 points to justify 4 marks. Some students write very briefly. For example, they'll say that a hierarchy should be made, and they'll give one example of a situation like showing Asher photographs of horses. That should be done the hierarchy. That's it. You can't get 4 marks for that. You have to justify those 4 marks by giving 4 points. A how type of question, I always put it this way, should be sequential or should be step by step. They're asking you how systematic desensitization should be done. So you must have learned stepwise in the syllabus. Hopefully, first this is done, then this, then this, then. So just put it down that way. That's all. How also means that you do not give any strengths or weaknesses. They are not asking you why systematic desensitization should be done. So some irrelevant answers are, it's better than giving medicines. Medicines are intrusive, or it results in empowering the client, or it results in the client developing coping strategies which they can use in future. All this is correct, but it's irrelevant to the question asked. They haven't asked you why systematic desensitization is the correct treatment. They're asking you how it should be done. So make sure to focus on the process, the procedure, how it is done, and nothing else. Okay, so now with the help of the answer, I'll just explain to you how we justify 4 marks here. First, we talk about the anxiety hierarchy, giving examples of horses. So, such as a picture of a horse and actually riding a horse. Those can be some situations that Asher wants to put up on the hierarchy. Also, because we are calling it a hierarchy, we do mention that there's going to be an order. Through the example, we explain that there's going to be an order to it. So, pictures, as far as they are concerned, might be less anxiety provoking for Asher. So, they would be placed somewhere lower on the hierarchy. But actually, riding on a horse could be the most frightening situation for hierarchies, for Ashers, that would be placed right on top of the hierarchy. So just, if you need to pause and read the example, how it is phrased, the phrasing is very important. Not only examples of situations, but how they would be placed lower and higher on the hierarchy. That needs to come across to show your knowledge of systematic desensitization and to show that you can apply it to any given situation. Then relaxation techniques, so definitely deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation. Talking about Asher, that he will have to do this, not generally talking about this is done in this therapy. No, Asher will have to practice these things as he's being exposed to those situations which we've given as examples before. So this is linking, this is doing EO2. And then he would have to, he would move up the hierarchy as he's practicing relaxation, and then he would come to a point where he would be able to face the most anxiety provoking situation of riding on the horse without feeling upset or distressed. So that is how I have concluded off. So till the very end, I want you to notice how I have kept on referencing Asher and horses. I have never deviated from that. So every sentence talks about Asher and the horses. Every sentence is an EO2 sentence. That is how such an answer should be structured. And there is enough depth in this material to justify 4 marks. It is a process. So first hierarchy is developed, then relaxation is taught, then relaxation is practiced with the hierarchy, and then it is practiced to the point that the ultimate situation can be dealt with. So step by step process is also there, always keeping Asher in mind and outlining all the steps, not just naming, oh, this could be one thing, that could be. This is how he would practice this one thing to justify that 4 marks or to give depth to the answer. So again, pause and read it if you need to see exactly how everything is implemented in the answer. Okay, then related to this only, next question was, evaluate this as a treatment for phobia. So see how the wording changes. Like I told you there, it was how. So it was EO2. When they want an EO3 type, then they give evaluate. Or other ways they could say is like give a strength, give a weakness, that way. I think there is some sort of question of that type also ahead. So here we will strictly give strengths or weaknesses. We will not give any description at all. In the same way that for AO1 we don't mix up AO3. For AO3 also don't mix up AO1. Many students have a habit from their past years that no matter what question is asked, first we should give some description. Does not get any credit in AO3 type of answers. Like if again you start writing about what is systematic desensitization, who gave it, what is its process, they are just going to ignore that part of the answer and you're going to waste your time and you're going to frustrate the examiner. Straight off come down to the strength or weakness. Now this is for 4 marks, unlike the first question which we saw, which was for 3 marks. This one is for 4. So this needs to be more detailed. After all, the marks allotted are different. Here you can take the essay type of approach. Like if a 20 marker was there on systematic desensitization, how you would have laid out any evaluation point in a full peel format. I would have laid it out in peel C format, peel plus counterpoint. So I have given that sort of a point here because that is justified for 4 marks. Primarily, I have taken a strength for evaluation. So it's 1 point only that I'm giving. But in the counterpoint, I'm giving a weakness of that. So in my answer, you'll find strength and weakness both are there. Because like I told you, I've taken PLC format, that's why. If you want, you can just take the PEEL format and just give one strength or one weakness for 4 marks. Any strength, any weakness is fine. There is no rule that you have to only give a strength. There is no rule that you have to only quote some study in the strength or weakness. Any point you're bringing up for evaluation, say from issues and debates also, or just some general methodological or even ethical strengths and weaknesses can apply to therapies. Anything is fine as long as you give it in a peel format, you give with context and reasoning to justify 4 marks. In case this is your first video and you're getting confused on what is the peel format and all, any video that I've covered earlier on how to write a 20 marker or an essay answer, please visit that. In that I've explained fully what is the peel format and peel C format of writing. Okay, so here what you have to do simply, what's the structure? Give a peel point here, either strength or weakness. Preferably give a counterpoint also like I've given, but if you don't, it's fine. You still get 4 marks if you're following the correct format. Peel format is nothing but making sure you have context and reasoning in your answer. So evidence should be there, means some relevant part of the treatment should be cited in whatever point you're making. It should not be a generic point. And reasoning, why you're saying that's a strength or weakness, that should be made clear. So if you write in that format, you will get 4 marks. So I'll explain little more effectively with the answer. I have chosen to take a strength that there is research evidence to show that this is a good therapy. So first I've just named that the strength is there is empirical evidence. Now to give context, I'm not just saying this in the air, or I'm not making a general point that I could have made for any theory. The context or evidence is there's actually this study by McGrath et al. Which has shown that 75% of patients who are treated with this treatment, they do show improvement. So this is my evidence in the peel format. Then to give a counterpoint, I have mentioned that unfortunately doesn't work for all patients. Looking at this figure, 75%, it looks like every patient of phobia benefits from the treatment. But what has been found is that this treatment works better for simple phobias, not for complex ones, not which involve a lot of irrational beliefs or the cognitive level doesn't work for them. Works for little superficial or surface level type of phobias, which don't involve too much of an element of thinking. So then I link off by saying that no doubt it is valid, that is what the evidence is showing, but because it cannot be applied to all types of phobias, the application is restricted. So that is my PLC format point for this one. Again, you can pause the video and you can read completely. If I did not want to give a counterpoint, I would just continue with McGrath, what they have shown, which were the other two groups in their study against which they compared this particular treatment, and exactly what about this treatment proved to be better than others. Like, was it that relapse was lowered? Were patients' experiences better of this treatment compared to others? Was this treatment able to get rid of more types of phobias compared to the other treatments? Means I would have just elaborated a little more on McGrath if I did not want to give a counterpoint. So that way also I could have justified 4 marks. Okay, then we have another AO2 question. These type of questions in which a complete scenario is given, we should read very carefully before answering so that we don't miss out on anything while writing the answer. And as we are reading, I'll be writing on the screen. You shouldn't write anything on your questions, but mentally you can keep on noting those things which I'm writing here. Before writing my answer, as I read the situation, I like to point out like what relevant points are coming across in the situation which I will be able to use in my answer. So that I just keep on annotating. Farah is depressed. She's talking to her mum. Farah says, I failed my last chemistry test, so I am not doing my chemistry homework this week. I'm not clever enough and I'm not going to apply for the university. Her mum replies, don't say that, you did well on your biology test. I'm sorry about the typos. Farah says the biology test was just luck. Universities only want the best students anyway. Average students like me don't have a chance. Use your knowledge of Beck's negative triad and Ellis's ABC model to explain Farah's depression. As I told you, to make sure that I cover everything, I like to make some annotations. So now that I know this is about negative triad and ABC model, which points can help me? She says something like she's not clever enough. This is clearly indicating a belief. Beck has spoken about the triad, negative beliefs about the self. So, this is a typical negative belief about the self, as we have learned in the syllabus. It's a generalized feeling that she has that she's not clever enough. Also, she has failed the chemistry test. This I can think of in terms of Ellis's theory. This seems to be an activating event, like this seems to be the event which has triggered off the depression. In Ellis's theory, this will count as irrational belief that she's not clever enough. So this I'm not clever enough can support both Ellis as well as Beck. Okay, when she says that the biology results were just luck, that is again an irrational belief. And average students like her don't have a chance. Again, irrational belief. So a lot of negative beliefs are coming across. She is depressed, that's a consequence in Ellis's model. Like what has happened because of her having all these negative beliefs is that she's going into depression. Okay, also universities only want the best students. This is like she is, in terms of the negative triad, having negative beliefs about the world. She feels that universities are biased against certain type of students. So that's not a negative belief about herself, but rather about a system. So it will classify as negative belief about the world. Okay, now this simple thing which I have done, like just marking a few things here, it might seem like no big deal, but what happens is when a long situation is given and students are writing, they just keep on picking only one or two points out of the entire situation given. Rest of the situation they don't even talk about it at all. For example, most students might focus on she's depressed and she failed the chemistry test, and they don't take into account the rest of the answer, so they lose marks. That's why this exercise of going through it and noting what is applicable where will help you to cover all of the answer when you're giving relevant examples in the answer below. Rest for this, like how to structure it, very similar to what I've said for previous answers. It is for 6 marks, meaning that Beck's triad is 3 marks, Ellis is 3 marks. So I would say organize it into 2 paragraphs, give 3 points for each, similar to what I had said in a previous question. Also for a previous AO2 question, in which I had said every point has to be linking to the situation, that same thing applies over here. So I have no more suggestions to give in terms of writing the answer. As I told you, I want to make the video quick. So just follow the same guidelines that I've given earlier for this one. So very quickly, to give you a demonstration, for Beck's negative triad, I have pointed out about herself what are her negative views, that she's not clever, about the world, that the universities do not want to accept average students, and the future. She says she has no chance in the future. I forgot to mark it there, but that indicates that she is hopeless about the future, the third part of the triad. You can see very worth noting when you read the answer is how it is written. So I have not given any general point. This is Beck's triad. It includes this, because in childhood this happens, nothing. This is in Farah's situation what we are seeing about triad. This is next in her situation what we are seeing about the triad. So every sentence is linked to the situation. Every sentence is AO2. There is no AO1 sentence. That is what you need to make note of. Okay, then for Ellis's model, again, in her case, Farah's case, activating event is failing the test. Irrational belief she's not clever enough, consequences going into depression and not applying for the university. Again, there I'd forgotten to mark, but at a behavioral level, her not applying is one of the consequences. So, this is how we answer this question. You can pause and go through the answer. And there was this last question, as I mentioned, there was no essay question in this section because they had it in both the previous ones. So you might be wondering how come so many questions are here, because that whole weightage of an essay question has got distributed into the smaller questions. Okay, this is similar to the ones we've seen previously. It's an AO3 question. So all the guidelines I've given earlier for AO3 questions for 3 marks, they would apply here. Let's read the question. Depression is often treated using CBT. Explain one limitation of CBT for depression. Previously, we had seen an evaluate question. When it's a general term like evaluate for AO3, we are free to give strength or weakness. But when they're specifically saying limitation, then it has to only be a weakness. It cannot be a strength. Again, as obvious as it might seem, I just want to bring this to your notice. Lots of limitations are there of CBT. So as I had said previously, just name a limitation, explain it. If you want, explain with an example, and just link off by connecting back to the question or connecting to grave, generalizability, validity, and all. I have taken the limitation that it requires active participation. As we know, it is a two-way treatment. It's not a passive treatment like medical treatment. Now, when we say active participation is required, people who have depression, they are unlikely to be very active unless it's only a very mild case of depression. Those who have moderate to severe depression are likely to be low on energy and low on social interest, so they might not want to engage with the therapist. And therefore, those who have moderate to severe depression, this theory might not be useful or applicable to them. So we can link it to application to everyday life. So as a treatment for depression, this is the problem with the treatment. Okay, whichever point you take, as I have mentioned before, make sure to take it through. Don't just name the point. It requires active participation. Depressed people are not actively participant. You'll get 1 mark for writing like that. So don't go in circles. I've said active participation, then I've explained what I mean by that they are low on energy and therefore they will not be able to actively participate. So that is how it needs to be put down. Okay, so as I said, I feel that this one was a very scoring section on January 25. You can let me know your thoughts below. If you have any suggestions, comments, questions about this video in particular, please leave it in the comments box below. Please do not contact me personally for video related queries or suggestions. In the next video, I will begin with PS01. We'll begin with cognition and development. Until then, keep on practicing and make sure you cover all the PS01 sections before coming to PS02. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.